Okay, so after extensive PTR testing, I'm going to rank all Season 3 The War Within dungeons. I have some thoughts. Here are the ranking criteria. Number 1, are you likely to complete this week 1 with a pug? The main criteria I'm going to rank this on is going to be completion rate the very first week. You know how everybody is going to want their first plus 10? Which dungeon are you most likely to succeed at, and which dungeon is going to be the absolute hardest for you to complete that weekly 10 that you are most likely going to be trying to do? This is going to be that list. Every single person that does high keys is going to be able to time each dungeon. You will always make a plan. So this is not about which is going to be necessarily the hardest or the most meta key or the most this. This is specifically for you as a pug player. If you've played PTR, you kind of already know how this list is going to look, because there are some dungeons that are going to be borderline impossible to complete week 1, and they need to change them. I'm hoping that this list provides some insight on what you should absolutely avoid week 1 of The War Within Season 3. Okay, starting right away, we're going to go from the bottom up, okay? The bottom up. There is one dungeon that is literally the worst dungeon. It is the biggest offender. This dungeon will brick. It will brick almost every one of your keys. You will have over 100 deaths trying to complete this the first week of The War Within. If you have not done this on PTR, it is the brick wall. It is the returning dungeon. It is the dungeon that is absolutely sending every single pug back into the Shadow Realm. The Shadow Lands. It is Halls of Atonement. I would literally rather eat soup than pug this key the very first week of Season 3. This key, for one very particular reason, okay? For one very particular reason, this key deserves to be here, which is this. Your tank is going to taste dirt on almost every single pull. Now, for me, I'm a long-term tank player. I have really enjoyed learning how to tank this dungeon on PTR, because I walked in the very first day and I died. And I walked in, I was like, okay, well, let me make a plan. I walked in, right? I went attempt number 2, I ate dirt. Attempt number 3, I ate dirt. Attempt number 4, done. I actually just repeat died. And I was like, what is happening right now? How is this so difficult? They haven't tuned it yet. They haven't tuned it whatsoever. And honestly, this dungeon needs tuning more so than anything else. Whether it's an HPS check or just a really unfair mechanic, that's kind of okay. But you know what nobody likes? Your tank dying. No one enjoys that. Your DPS absolutely hate dying, okay? Your DPS absolutely hate your tank perishing. Your healer gets so stressed about your tank. But the main reason is why your tank dies here. It's not incredible auto attack damage. Halls of Atonement features a very old school method of tanking where your tank is supposed to kite. You are supposed to watch your bleed stacks and you're supposed to be kiting. That is the method of which you survive this dungeon. But if you don't know that and the tank just plants right in the pack, you're dead. Like, there's actually almost nothing you can do. You as a healer could be spam healing your tank. Right now, there is a bleed in this dungeon. It does so much damage. And if you don't know how to manage that bleed and how to actually tank this, you're gone. Like, you're just not going to be able to time this key. Every single tank is going to walk in here, regardless of which is the best tank or not. If you don't understand why you're taking damage, you are going to perish. This dungeon is going to be an absolute monstrosity. The bosses are actually fine. To be honest, the bosses are okay. The third boss is going to be a little bit tough with the double dispel mechanic. More than anything, this dungeon is just going to absolutely shred and wreck your tanks. I think that this is going to be a very, 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 very tough pug dungeon. Now, it's going to be fun for somebody like me who wants to learn how to game it and play with people who can help me. But this is all, you're making use of Binding Shot, you're making use of any slow you have. There are tanks that are speccing specific abilities to deal with this. There are also an unfair part of this dungeon, which is that tanks that can deal with bleeds are much better than tanks who cannot. So these are parry tanks and prop heli. Prop heli is going to be really good at this dungeon, weirdly enough, and a Guardian Druid is going to suffer. So Halls of Atonement, I would literally rather eat soup than pug this key. Trust me, do not join a weekly no-leaver. Halls of Atonement, find a different one. This key, unless it gets tuned very soon, it's just, you're going to actually be there for an hour. More than, you're going to be there for 10 hours. Like, you will not complete this key. It just gets progressively harder, too. You finally get past the second boss. Maybe you pull pack by pack. You get a second boss. After second boss, your tank dies again. Your tank dies again. You spam wipe. Your tank dies again. It's just, this is going to be very, very difficult to do week 1. Okay, moving on. because I don't need to spend too long talking about it. They just need to change how tanks interact with this dungeon. Everything else is kind of fine, to be honest. Okay, right above this, there is no dungeon as bad as this. This is literally in its own category right now. Right above this is another returning dungeon, which they made much harder. You may remember this from Season 1 of The War Within. This dungeon is Arakara, which they made significantly harder. If you manage to not fall in one of the many holes in these bridges on the way to the first pole, then you will be greeted with poisons that stack endlessly. If you do not have poison dispels, you will be in despair. It is borderline unhealable. They haven't changed that yet. They changed the first area to be significantly harder than it was, not easier. They nerfed the dungeon, but accidentally buffed the entire dungeon. The second area also got buffed. The big guys that used to do a slam now do a brutal AoE, where any overlapping damage, if a DPS is not aware to press the defensive, gone, done, tasting dirt. The problem with stuff like this is that all of a sudden you feature mandatory poison dispels, you feature massive, unpredictable forms of damage, on top of the fact that in the last area, your tank still has to deal with a potential one-shot, that if they don't know what they're doing, they will die. Your healer can dispel you, but if you pull too many things at the end, I would recommend, just so you know, in a pug, especially average pug, just go middle. Don't go to the sides, just go middle. You have to fight the overseers as a tank. If you don't know what you're doing, you will die. The main thing you'll notice is that the dungeons that will be ranked down here are specifically when your tank dies. Nobody likes that. Tanking, if there are just mechanics that will own pug tanks, it's the worst feeling. You could be a very good healer and just not be able to keep your tank alive. You could be a DPS player like, all right, I'm ready to blast, and then your tank goes blup, and you just go, oh man, and your tank feels bad. They don't want to tank the dungeon. Nobody wants to do the dungeon. They just need to make it so that tanks do not fall over in most dungeons, and I know you still have to tank. I get it. I like tanking. I like the challenge of it. But these types of mechanics are not fair to anybody who doesn't know the mechanics, okay? They did have an ethos going into the War Within where they were going to change tank busters, and then Season 1 happened. Do you remember Season 1 of the War Within with Grim Batol and Stone Vault? How did you feel about your tanks in that dungeon? Did you like it when they walked in and just died immediately? And you just went, all right, well, I guess we can go next. Did you like that? Because I didn't like that very much. I didn't like tanking them. I didn't like healing them. I didn't like DPSing them because I was terrified the entire time that my tank was going to go splat. Honestly, this dungeon feels like that. At the end, this one is not as bad for tanks, to be honest. It's just that there's a mechanic at the end for tanks that'll be a problem. This is actually more of the fact that there's a mandatory poison dispel requirement. Anytime in a pug there's a mandatory poison dispel, you get that one boomy. You're like, well, okay, we have a druid. He can at least do one poison dispel, but he forgets that he has it, and he presses it like one time in the whole dungeon on himself when he had one stack. It's tough. I don't like mandatory dispel profiles. That being said, moving on. We have the next dungeon in what I would consider these two to be probably the hardest pug keys. I think that I think the first boss can kill you here. I think the second boss can kill you here. And I still think the last boss, although it got easier, that's the only actual nerf to this. The last boss is much easier. Still think it'll be hard to complete this in a weekly key. Okay, moving right along. Dawnbreaker actually is next. I'm torn between Dawnbreaker and B tier. This is a dungeon where people voted this back, but this is a DPS take. Honestly, this is a DPS take. The biggest thing about Dawnbreaker is that DPS liked it because it was a 3-boss dungeon. It was short. It was easy. But as a tank or a healer, this dungeon sucked. This dungeon was so bad in Season 1. No tank liked tanking this, and no healer liked healing it. The damage patterns are very specifically terrible. The second boss is an atrocity. They made the first boss harder, and it will actually kill some pugs. But the biggest thing is that although they did nerf it, they also changed some of the abilities, and I could foresee this being a potentially tough pug key to do. Anytime that your tank is in significant mortal danger, on top of the fact that your healer has to worry about something like the second boss, can be tough. I honestly think this is still B tier. There are a lot of redeeming factors, mostly 3 bosses, pretty quick, very straightforward. But remember, we are taking this for granted because we played Season 1. I imagine if you're watching this, you played Season 1. And if you didn't, please stop by stream or something, watch somebody do Dawnbreaker. If you don't know what to pull in this dungeon, bad idea. because the second area after the first boss is very clear what you do, but it's a very not intuitive dungeon. The layout of this dungeon, it makes you think you go here or here or here, but there's a very specific route. They put a lot of mobs in the courtyard area. If you don't know how to do the second boss or where to position that boss, you're going to end up pulling more stuff. If you have to pull the courtyard area, they added a ritualist there, etc., etc. This dungeon also features a relatively mandatory curse to spell that is not from your healer. That is most likely from a DPS player. So all of a sudden you're required to bring a druid, a boomy, or like a druid, a shaman, or a mage or something like that. So I don't like mandatory dispel profiles. It locks the comp. It makes everybody feel bad when you have to bring a dispel and you can't take your friend who's that warlock because they do not have the ability to dispel, even though you want to play with them. So I think that curse dispels are borderline mandatory here, unless you were playing with a god tier healer. But you're probably going to want at least one curse dispel that is not from your healer. So I think this dungeon actually fine. Like I said, redeeming qualities about this is that it is pretty straightforward. Fast 3-boss dungeon. Weekly timer, pretty chill, but there is a significantly better option that we'll get to in a second. Next B tier dungeon is going to be Priory. Now, Priory is actually a very interesting open concept dungeon. There are so many ways to route Priory. There are actually many, many, many different ways to route Priory. And ultimately, there's a pug route and there's a high key route. The problems with Priory happens when that in your weekly 10 or your 12 this season or your 15, you try to do the high key route. Bad idea. Trust me, there are two ways to pull Priory. There's the pug route, there's the high key route. The high key route involves pulling like 3 to 5 casters in every pull because they are technically good percentage. They also kill you with any potentially miss CC. I don't know if you've pugged before, but you tend to miss CCs. I don't know if you've pugged any keys before, but no one kicks. Like, you want to limit the amounts of casters in general in any pug environment to the absolute minimum because you don't chain CC things. Like, that happens in very high keys. Doesn't happen in your average weekly vault key. So this dungeon, if you don't know how to route it, there is a very specific way to route this, which I think makes it a lot easier. They did technically nerf it. The advantage of Priory, pretty dungeon, lots of AoE, fun dungeon in general. I think this dungeon is actually pretty fun, but they made the first boss harder. They made the second boss is fine, third boss is fine. I actually think the bosses here are fine. You're not likely to wipe. If you get past the first area, you're not too likely to wipe as long as you don't overpull the next area. The biggest problem is when people pull Priory like it's a very high key when you're just playing with Steve, who got off work and just put the kids to bed. Steve doesn't fucking want to do an advanced Priory route, okay? But Steve does not want to consider a chain CC and miss one kick and immediately die. Like, you just want to game sometimes. So Priory is a dungeon that can get you if you overpull it and you overcomplicate it. Don't overcomplicate this dungeon. The timer is actually pretty chill, and you'll be just fine. That's the biggest thing about Priory. Also, figure out the pug route. Very helpful. Okay, next dungeon, actually. We have 4 dungeons left. Streets, Gambit, Floodgate, Ecodome. Okay? Now, this is the new dungeon. We're going to go bottom up. Next dungeon on this list, I am torn between 2 options here, and I will choose Streets. Streets is a B tier dungeon. It is a high B tier dungeon like this. Streets is interesting. It technically has a lot of bosses, but the particular thing about Streets is that it is a pure knowledge check. There is no individual mechanic that hits that hard. There's no individual mob that will wipe you. There's no individual pull that's just like, this is impossible. But there's so much knowledge about this dungeon. You will have pugs on the first week, on the first boss, that don't know how the cage thing works. Dead. You will have pugs on the first week, on the second boss, the menagerie, let's say you go there, who don't know how that boss works. Dead. You will have pugs on the third boss who don't know how that mailroom boss works. Dead. You will have pugs who don't know how the fourth boss works. Dead. You don't know how bugs. Okay, finally, you get to the end. They don't know how the portals work. Dead. This dungeon borderline should be down here, to be honest. I'll put it here because technically speaking, it's not hard. Like, this is a hard dungeon. This one's not hard. It's not like there's a ton of casters. Just go left. Trust me, go left. Don't go right. After the first boss, go left in a pug. It's much easier. It's not like there's any particular thing that's that hard. It's just that there's a knowledge check. And most people will going into this next season will not have done Tazavesh Streets. And so they're going to walk in and just not know the mechanics. Technically, you get to learn on Mythic 0 week. Technically, you get to probably do +2s or +5s. You know, you get to climb your way, technically, before you hit that +10 weekly. But a lot of people just jump in. And if you don't know how to do this dungeon, I highly recommend. This is one of those where you just like watch a video real fast. It's not that complicated, but it will take you by surprise. So watch a video, right? This is the important thing. This one, to recap, I had to find my own images because no one had actually made a Season 3 tier list, so I made this myself today. This one's Halls of Atonement. This is like the absolute word to recap. This is, you will not even finish this key. Like, you will not get through this. Your tank, unless they are giga tank and your healer is like on point, everybody does their job, which doesn't happen in a pug environment, you will not complete. This is going to be the hardest weekly key unless they significantly change the interaction in this dungeon, which they don't appear to be doing yet, and I'm concerned. I really think that this dungeon will eat tanks alive, and your tank will eat dirt in this dungeon, and not the good type of dirt, not the type of dirt that your mom made for you back when you were a kid and you had friends over in the summer, and they were like, this, you know, the dirt that she would make, or they put the gummy worms in the dirt, and it would be actually crushed up Oreos, and it was delicious. It was like an Oreo, crushed up Oreo with pudding and gummy worms, and it was delicious. Not that dirt. This is bad dirt. This is real dirt. You don't want to eat this real dirt. It does not build a strong immune system. You will just perish. Okay, this is bad dirt here. Okay, moving on. So that's Streets. Streets is a big knowledge check. Watch a guide. Somebody will make a guide. I'll make a guide. And it'll just be like, look, hey, on this boss, move left. On this boss, move right. Easy. Understand. Like, it's not that hard, but you have to know in advance. Any dungeon that requires you to know in advance is the hard part here. Okay, next. You know, it's a little bit hard here because this next one, I want to rank this in terms of just general fun. There are all three of these dungeons are actually, I'm pretty excited to play. This one's Floodgate, that's Ecodome, that's Gambit. And from PTR testing, I'm not going to lie, I actually think that the next dungeon that belongs in A tier, okay, is Ecodome Aldani. I don't think this is quite an S tier dungeon, it's an A tier dungeon. It's got some variety, but mostly it's a pretty linear, straightforward dungeon. There's not a lot to it. The thing I like about this dungeon the most is that it's intuitive. Most of the mechanics here, because it's a newer dungeon that they made, are like, there is a circle here, dodge it. There is a line here, dodge it. It's clear, the visuals are crisp. If you walk into this dungeon for the first time, you will probably know what to do. Because it's actually intuitive. There are different types of packs, but they've yet made it so that it's relatively straightforward. This thing, circle, dodge. That puddle, dodge. That mechanic, kick. That leap, line. Like, it's very straightforward, and I like the fact that you don't have to watch a guide to do this dungeon. If anything, that propels it to S. There are a few things like the second boss, which I think is going to probably own some people, but you can learn that. Comparing the fact that you basically only have to learn the second boss here, like, I really think that this dungeon is very straightforward. My problem with it is there's almost no variety. The route will get set. It's a pretty linear. There's not a lot of choice. There's like a few choices, but it's an illusion of choice. It's not an open concept dungeon. You basically pull kind of the same thing every time, and I can see it getting boring. Like, in the season, I could see it getting a little bit boring, but it is beautiful. I mean, it's a really pretty aesthetic. I think that that's something underrated in WoW. Look at this Halls of Atonement, Arakara. You know, like, WoW is this thing where they're like, we're so serious, we're so dark and gothic. We belong in the DC universe. We belong in we're so dark. And it's like, they sometimes design things to be, like, very moody. I like the fact that this one's just lush, vibrant, and fun. Like, you know what I mean? This one's just solid. Like, it's just a solid dungeon, actually. All right? Now, here we go. Next dungeons. I would put this dungeon in high S tier if it wasn't for the second boss. This second boss is a monstrosity. This is Gambit. That picture right there, the picture that we have right there, this right here, that's Hooktail. That's the second boss of Gambit. This boss will eat your pugs for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You will wipe repeatedly on the second boss. I don't know what they have to do for it. I think that they just honestly should give that boss a straight 20-30% health nerf. Like, at least have it die faster. If your tank does not know how to position perfectly, if your DPS are not stacked consistently, which never happens, and move in the right way, which doesn't happen, if people do not use their CCs effectively, which doesn't happen, if your healer doesn't understand the fact that there's a double dispel mechanic on top of intense positioning, which probably doesn't happen, you're just die. You're just gonna die. This boss will actually, it's really, really tough. High recommendation that you practice and learn a strategy for the second boss. Honestly, the first is fine. The first area is chill. Like, honestly, in a lower key, if the fish sticks go off, it's cool. It's chill. You just kill them. Like, it's fine. If as long as you don't overpull the first area, pretty much nothing happens. Like, your tank shouldn't die. There's not a ton of AoE damage. There's a few casters which do hurt, but honestly, you just kill fish sticks. They're annoying, but you can just kill them, and it's not a problem. High keys, you got to do some chain CC stuff. Low keys, just like middle keys to get your weekly vault and stuff like that. This key will be fine. First boss, very straightforward, very simple. They added a new thing to it. You don't have to have a weak aura for it anymore. You just click on the icon. Everybody kind of understands. You could walk into that boss having never done it, and you would kind of get it. Like, you would be like, okay, the boss is immune. You would take a look around. You'd be like, blue, okay. You could put it together in your head. I appreciate that. Second boss, however, is it's going to, I don't know how they change it, but if they just change the second boss to be a little bit easier, maybe 2 add spawn instead of 4 or something like that, this dungeon, high giga S tier. Only positive things to say about it. Last area is fair. Don't overpull, great. High key, overpull, have coordination, great. It's okay. Every mob in here is actually fine, except for the second boss. Last boss is also okay. It's a long fight. There are some mechanics, but in general, they're all fair. They're actually fair mechanics. It's a little tough, but it's okay. Second boss does not feel fair. Second boss in a pug, you're gonna have your mage over here, your boomy over here, and nobody's gonna help you, and they're gonna die. And I don't know what they do to change this boss, but I think this needs changes, which means there is one dungeon left. I do believe that Floodgate moves to S tier. Now let me explain why. Because this season, Floodgate was not S tier for a few main reasons. It was a very hard dungeon to do in pugs. One of the reasons for that. Both of them have been removed. As you know, Bubbles is no more. And if you didn't know this, Bubbles is no more. Bubbles is... Rest in peace, Bubbles. You will actually, when you first get into this dungeon in the season, I don't want to even spoil it for you, but watch how they remove Bubbles. It's actually kind of funny, and I enjoyed it. Okay, I don't want to say I enjoyed it because that makes me sound like a bad person. Floodgate is S tier. Let me tell you why. Open concept, fun dungeon, kind of has variety. You don't have to pull the same thing, although there is a route, obviously, from last season. The main benefit of Floodgate going into this season is that Bubbles is no more, so there's no weird Shadow Meld skip nonsense that you have to worry about. The bosses are actually all relatively fair, although challenging. The second boss, if anything, is my only problem with it, which I don't know if people don't really know how the bomb mechanic works. But the actual thing about that mechanic is even if 2 bombs go off in a lower key level, you can probably save it. You just send a healing cooldown and you might be able to save it. So it's forgiving in a way. The Big Mama is actually fair. It hurts, but it's fair. They reduce the tank buster so that relative to key level, your tank won't get one-shot as much. Great. Swamp Face, hard, but fair. Honestly fair. Does a lot of damage. Maybe they could tune down the damage a little bit, but honestly fair fight. Last boss, hard, but relatively fair again. So the only thing about the last boss is people do have to learn that mechanic. That one is not intuitive, I will say, and Swamp Face is not intuitive, but once you get it a few times, you'll kind of understand it. They're not that hard to do or understand. There's no mandatory dispel in Floodgate. There's no mandatory dispel profile. You do have options. In higher keys, you can combine a bunch of pulls. In lower keys, you can split a bunch of pulls. You can take 1 caster instead of 5. The only thing about a Floodgate, which I don't like, is the seaweed pull. I think that the pull before Swamp Face is the reason that this dungeon, if they change that, absolute S tier dungeon. The pull before that just requires chain CC on seaweeds. I think that is unfair, and I think they should change that, or maybe change the interaction, or maybe even just take 1 out. I don't know what they could do, but there's going to be some interesting stuff. They changed the Blood Warper pack, so after Big Mama, you can just click on the box. There is no Blood Warper there. That guy was hard because your healer had to send cooldowns. And then you would go from that Blood Warper to the next Blood Warper pack, and you would die. What happens now is there's no, that first Blood Warper does not exist, which means you have to pull something else in the dungeon, which is interesting. I think that it's a good change. I think the direction they've taken Floodgate in actually propels it to S tier. I do think you'll be able to complete this in a weekly key. The biggest thing about this dungeon is don't overpull. I do think you'll be able to complete this in a weekly key. The biggest thing is don't overpull. You technically won't get brick walled by bosses if you just say in your party chat on Swampface, if somebody really doesn't know this, then they didn't play this season. Most of people are going to understand this in Priory because we had them in this season. But just as a note, as in party chat, somebody just say walk left. Like, just tell people to go left, because some people sometimes go right still. Just tell people to walk left. I think that Swamp Face, if anything, is maybe the one downside of this, but relatively speaking, it's a fair mechanic. It's relatively straightforward. You press a defensive on the AoE, you walk left, you hit the boss. It's actually not that much to it, it just hurts. So I think that Floodgate is actually a good dungeon. I do think that success rate-wise, it will be potentially a tiny bit lower. Like, I think Ecodome will actually have the highest success rate, honestly, as people learn it. But I would say that this is just, this deserves to be here because it's fun. This dungeon doesn't feel boring. You've got big AoE, you've got some good pulls, you have different types of mobs, but not too many casters. You have some things that prevent you from doing this, but other things that are fun. Aside from the seaweed pull, everything feels relatively fair. I like this dungeon. I think that it involves tank creativity, it involves your healer to flex, it allows your DPS to flex. Like, everything feels good about this dungeon now that you don't have to meld skip bubbles and do any sort of weird box mechanic where you have to inch toward the box and try not to pull the pack. So I think that Floodgate is actually in a decent spot right now after the changes. Good nerfs to this dungeon. The wind-up doesn't actually kill melee as much anymore. There's a bunch of little things they changed about this that make it a lot better. The only thing is that all three of these could be S tier. They just need to change the second boss of Gambit. Easy S tier dungeon. Everybody remembers this. Very fun. Good AoE. Good damage. Good this. Everything's fine about this dungeon except second boss. You'll trust me. Trust me. You come back to this list. Start the season. Come back to this list and tell me if I'm wrong. I would love to hear your thoughts on what you think the best dungeons are because this one, good luck. I really want to see how you feel about it. Start the season, come back and tell me what you think. That is my dungeon tier list. That is what I think after playing PTR a bunch. Mandatory Dispel profile. Tank eats dirt. Not the good kind of dirt. It's rough. So anyways, those are my thoughts on the PTR dungeons. I do hope they take a look at them and